Hey guys, it's Denise from loom and this time we're going to loom knit cupcake skirt dolls. I highly recommend that you watch the video completely before starting the project. Alright, let's begin with a drawstring cast on. Take a single strand of working yarn and secure it to the anchor peg with a knot. And now we're going to zigzag every other peg until we reach peg number 12. And at that point you're going to turn to go in the other direction and you're just going to lay your working yarn over those 12 pegs. And now you're going to knit off every peg that has 2 strands of yarn. And you're done with your cast on. You'll start knitting your leg and you're going to need 18 rows for that. So wrap and turn on the first peg and then you're going to start knitting using the U-wrap version of the knit stitch. When you're done, you're going to take the working yarn and put it across 4 pegs and you're going to cut it and then just put it aside. We're going to now work on leg 2, and again you need to knit 18 rows, but first you got to cast on in the other direction. So secure the working yarn just like you did last time, and again you're going to zigzag the other 12 pegs and you're going to do the same thing. So cast on 12 pegs, knit 18 rows. When you reach row 18, you're going to knit all of your pegs except for the very last one. You're not going to knit that one. You're going to put your working yarn down and bring the other working yarn from the other side over and knit that peg. Then you're going to take those 2 strands of yarn and you're going to tie them together, the one that you previously cut and the one that you're working with. Then you can take your working yarn back and now you're going to start knitting, and this time you're going to knit in the round. So you're just going to continue around the loom. You're not knitting flat, you're knitting round. As you reach the very back part, which was peg 12, you're going to see a gap. Just keep knitting, so just bring your yarn over, which is going to close that gap. Keep knitting until you reach peg 24, which is back at the very beginning, and now you have the option to change the yarn color for the shirt. You're going to cut the strand of yarn that you've been knitting with your working yarn, and you're going to take the new strand of yarn and you're going to tie these 2 ends together. And you're just going to do a simple knot. Just wrap the 2 yarns together, push the knot as close as you can, and then go ahead and secure it nice and tight. Push it up a little more so that it gets as close to the peg as you can possibly get it, and tie it a second time. Now you're going to knit the shirt, and for that we need 13 rows. When you're done, you're now again going to change the color in order to make the face, which you will need 18 rows in order to do that. Just like before, you're going to cut the working yarn, get your new color, and tie those 2 strands together nice and tight, and now start knitting your 18 rows. When done, you will do the modified flat drawstring bind off. Take the working yarn and you're going to wrap it around the loom. About 1.5 times. cut the yarn, and then you're going to take that working yarn and you're going to feed it through every other loop. The loops that you're not using, just take the yarn and basically just take it around behind those pegs. When you're done, you're going to remove only those loops with the working yarn. Now, I will confess that I made a small boo-boo, and that is that you don't remove the first loop until you feed the working yarn through that loop twice, at the beginning and at the end, right here. So I put the loop back on, I'm going to feed the working yarn through it so it's been fed twice, and then I'm going to remove it. Now we're going to work on the rest of the loom. So take another strand of yarn, you're going to secure it, and this is a separate one. You're basically taking your yarn again, and just like before, you're going to wrap that working yarn around the loom, cut your yarn, and now we're going to do the loops that are still left on the peg. So feed your working yarn through every loop that's left on your loom. So at this point you have a loop on every other peg. Just like before, you're going to feed that working yarn through that first peg again, and then just remember to remove the knot. And again, just like before, we're going to remove all of the loops off the pegs. Now put your loom aside, and we're going to work on pulling those and stretching your stitches. And this is very important, so don't leave it out. Stretch them on all sides and then just start pulling on those strings. It's best if you pull the project inside out, and you're going to pull all of those strings nice and tight. And I'll tell you that sometimes you get that extra loose loop, and if you do, just pull it. It's going to work to your benefit, because what you're trying to do is make sure that this hole is closed nicely. Once you feel like you've gotten this as nice and tight as you can, and you've pulled them till they can't pull anymore, you're going to take all of your strings and you're going to tie them together nice and tight. In fact, 2 knots are okay. Take a quick look at it and see if you're happy with your work. And then just stretch it and cut those extra strings. Save them because you will be using them later. And now we're going to move on to making the arms, for which you will need 12 rows. So secure your working yarn again, and you're going to zigzag cast on 10 pegs this time instead of 12, and you're going to lay the working yarn over, and you're going to knit the pegs that have the 2 loops just like before. And again, you're going to wrap that and turn on that first peg and go ahead and knit your 12 rows. Now finishing the arms is going to be done a little different, so I want to give you a heads up. When you are done with those 12 rows, you are now going to take your first loop and you're going to move it to the second peg and put it above that loop and knit off. You're going to go to the very last loop on your peg and move that over to the second to last peg and knit off. And now you wrap all of those pegs, and you're going to cut the yarn. And yes, I did by mistake not undo the knot on the anchor peg, so go ahead and undo that, no harm done. And now you're going to take your working yarn and you're going to feed it through all of the loops that are on your peg in order to do a drawstring cast off. Then remove all the loops from your pegs and take your loom and put it aside and stretch those stitches. pull the strings on both ends in order to close the fabric. When you're done, you're going to take your yarn needle and you're going to thread it with the working yarn that you use to draw string cast on, and you're going to sew the two sides together in order to close the fabric. You don't need to use any fancy technique. If you happen to know one, then go ahead and use it. Otherwise, the objective is just to sew the two sides together. You will notice that I did not use any stuffing. For my arms, I find that they shape and they look nice without the need of putting any extra stuff in. So why waste it? Once it's up at the top, you can make a knot with the two strings. Then you're going to get your scissors and you're going to cut the short string of the two, and with your crochet hook, you're going to bring that other string through the middle of the hole. And that's your arm. All you have to do is repeat the process in order to get a second one and then move on to your skirt. Don't panic about all the writing. I'm going to go through all the steps with you and they're real easy. Again, secure your working yarn at the anchor peg and you're going to draw string cast on all of your pegs. And once you come back to the beginning, just like before, you're going to knit off every peg that has two strands. This may look a little tricky, but when you head back to the front, you're basically going to lay your yarn over peg number 1, and then we're going to start on rows 1 through 4 where we're going to do a knit and purl. But we're going to skip that first peg, go to the second one, knit, and then purl, and we're going to do knit and purl for 4 rows. And that first stitch that you skipped, you're only skipping that stitch on this first row. Rest of the time you do your knit and purl, which is a single rip stitch. So just knit and purl, knit and purl, knit and purl, knit and purl. That was the bottom of the skirt, and now you have the option to change the color for the top part. So don't forget to remove the knot after a few rows, and we're going to go ahead and cut that working yarn. If you're going to change the color, bring the new one, and just like before, we're going to go ahead and make a knot with those two strands, and it's a simple knot, nothing too grandeur. And for the next set of instructions, like I said, you can pause the video in order to follow the pattern. So here's your pattern once again. It's actually very simple. It's just 2 rows of knit and 4 rows of purls 3 times, and then 2 rows of knit. Time to cast off the skirt. So wrap the working yarn around the loom. Okay, and then we're going to cut the working yarn. And now, just like before, you're going to feed the working yarn through every loop. Well, maybe not like before. This time we're going to do every loop. When you're done, you're going to remove all the loops from the pegs. Put your loom aside, and then you're going to stretch your stitches. Pull on the cast on and cast off just a little, just to kind of start you off, but make sure that you don't close it. And here are your doll parts. Now you're ready to start stuffing your doll. So start from the head, and you're going to be working your way down. You can use polyfill or leftover yarn. Try not to use the yarn that's too dark, and try not to overstuff your doll, because you do want to keep her nice and soft. And then you're going to go ahead and pull on that cast on string in order to close your leg nicely like this. And then you're going to get your yarn needle and you're going to thread the yarn needle with that string, the cast on string, and we're going to go ahead and sew the leg up. Again, no fancy technique. We're just trying to get the two sides together. As you sew upward, start stuffing the leg. Repeat the same process with the other leg. If you did it correctly, you'll end up with both strings at the top. And we're going to take those two strings and we're going to tie them together. Now you're going to need to weave in those two strings, and so you're going to go ahead and get your crochet hook and you're going to weave the working yarn through a few stitches. Just bring it up, it doesn't have to be too many, 4 or 5. Pull on the string just a bit and then cut it. And you're going to do the same thing with your other string. Now you're going to take one of those leftover strings that I told you to hold on to, and you're going to tie it between the face and the shirt in order to create a head. So grab it and tie it really, really, really tight, and once you feel you've done that, make a nice tight tie for a knot. And tie it one more time for good measure. Alright, there you go. Now let's weave in those extra strings. So get your crochet hook, and just like before, you're going to weave it in both of those strings through a couple of stitches, pull tight and cut. Do the same thing with the other one. Now let's attach the arms. You're going to start by figuring out exactly where you want your arm. I like it right here. So thread your yarn needle with that longer thread and position it between the head and chest if you want to do it like I did. And easy enough, just start to sew the arm onto your doll. Alright, now let's add the details. On the arm, you're going to count 4 stitches up, and you're going to take a little string, you're going to wrap it around the arm, and you're going to tie a knot nice and tightly, and this is going to create a little hand. The leftover string you're going to weave in with your crochet hook. On the leg, you're going to count up 6 to 7 stitches and wrap a string around the leg, tie it on the back, and this is going to create your foot. Now, like I said before, we're going to go ahead and weave in the ends, and we're going to do like we've been doing all along. Just take the crochet hook and feed it through a couple of stitches to get to the other end and pull it through. When you get to the other end, you're going to cut the yarn and then you're going to repeat as necessary. Now let's work on the face, and I've used pins to mark nose, eyes, and ears right here. They work really good. So all you have to do is, when you're ready, is pull the marker off with a threaded needle, feed the needle through that marked stitch. We're going to create ears. Go ahead and tie a knot, and this is going to secure your yarn so you don't lose it. And then you're going to feed the needle again in order to create a little loop, and you're going to feed the needle through that loop and come back and feed it through one of the stitches a little bit lower than the one that you did, and as you see, you can press them into shape and you see a little ear. So cut the shorter end of the working yarn, and you're going to take the other one, and that one you're going to weave in that end like we've been weaving in the other ends. Cut all of that leftover working yarn, and at this point we're just cleaning up, and I'm going to show you I did the other one earlier. Aren't they cute little ears? And we can move on to the nose. Same thing, remove the marker, feed the working yarn through the stitch, and again we want to secure our yarn so it doesn't come off, so we're going to do a little knot, and then you're going to take your threaded needle and you're going to wrap that same stitch 2 more times in order to create a little nose. You will have to continuously kind of work with the yarn in order to position it and shape it how you want it. So every so often you are going to need to pull on the thread and then loosen it up and pull it until you see something that looks like the nose you want, and then you're just going to weave in the end like you've done with everything else. Again, put it back into shape so it looks the way you want it. Get your scissor and cut the ends of the working yarn. Keep shaping your little nose until it looks the way you want it to. For the eyes, you're going to need to turn your doll upside down, remove the marker, and get your needle with some floss and feed it through that stitch, and keep one end of it out. So hold on to it because that's going to be your eyelash, and you're going to wrap that same stitch 3 times. Like the nose, every time you do a wrap, you have to try to position it so that it lands exactly where you want it, and you might need to pull on it and loosen it until you get it looking exactly the way you want it to. Once you reach your goal, you can just take your scissors and cut one end of the floss. With your needle, you just need to push in that same end that you just cut in order to neaten things up, and then trim your eyelashes so they look the way you want them to. Next, you can unravel some thread in order to make matching yarn for your buttons, And we're going to start off with the bottom, and we're going to add this button to your foot, and you're going to pinch the foot in order to make it flat so that it looks like a real foot. And you're going to put a knot on the end of it. Now we're going to do some sewing in order to shape the foot the way we want it to, so that it just doesn't look like a long leg. And for that, you're just sewing up and down, nothing major, until the foot is flat. Adding the button at this point is optional, but if you're going to do it, make sure that you use a needle that works and will feed through the little hole on the buttons. I know the button is almost exactly the flesh color, so it may be a little hard to see. So let me give you another example. This shows you the button on it, and you can see it a lot better. Alright, when you're done, all you have to do is take your yarn and needle and make a knot. At this point, then you're ready to add your skirt to your doll. So just finish pulling on those strings from your cast on just a little bit. Make sure you don't do too much of it, and that you don't close it, because you need to pull the skirt up to put it on the doll, and then just kind of play with it until it is positioned exactly the way you want it. Make sure the nicer part of your skirt is on the front, and then get your crochet hook, and we're going to weave in the ends. And you do need to secure this, so you're going to have to make a knot, because this skirt is not the kind you put on and take off. You do want to secure it. So you make your knot, and then you continue weaving in the ends. This is your bottom. Once you feel happy with how much you weave it in, then just cut, and you're going to repeat the same process on the top one. Now let's add the hair. Find the middle of the head, and right there you will start adding your hair. So you're going to feed in 12-inch strands of yarn through individual stitches. You're going to continue to feed the strands down the hairline, and you can mark this with a pen or just use the ears to give you an idea. Here's what it would look like once it's done, and you're just basically feeding it again from the top to the bottom. So you're going to take your crochet hook and take your yarn, and you're going to really just feed half of it, and then make sure that the two ends are aligned and match. And just keep doing that. Now you only need to do the outer portion of it. You're not going to have to do it completely. So once you have it like around, that's good enough. You just finger brush the hair upward in order to create a ponytail, and you can get yourself either a little rubber band, one of those tiny hair rubber bands, or a strand of yarn, and make a tie real up high on the top of the head of the doll and create a little bun just like this, see? And stretch it out so that it looks the way you want it to. And then optional, you can add a bow to your doll if you want. Real easy to match her little cupcake skirt and shirt. And then personally, I kind of added some blush again to her cheeks if you want to, and a little button on the top. And I just use some sample blush that was given to me and a little Q-tip. It's real easy, put as much as you want or as little, and then I tie a matching strand of yarn around the neck. Kind of gives the doll a little more definition, and I really think it looks good. So you make 2 knots and then you cut that working yarn off, and you are done with your little dolly. Almost optional, you can add an extra strand of hair if you like. I thought this gave her kind of a little cute looky going on, and then just cut your working yarn to the size that you want. I thought this was perfect, and my baby doll is done. And as a bonus, because you stayed to the end, here's a sneak peek at my next doll project. These are not the true colors, so stay tuned.